This is Family Electric Ghost, and we're live on the air for the first time with Joanna Mcspadden. Welcome to the Family Electric Ghost podcast. How are you doing tonight?
Hi, thank you. I'm doing great.
I want to let people know that we are a featured podcast on a Newsly platform. You can see that icon up there that says listen on Newsly. For anybody who's listening or watching, you can use that coupon code of GHOST to check that out for free for 30 days. We'll be on Newsly later tonight because we are a featured podcast on that platform for an audio only version of the show. And so we want people to check that out. We do have your link up to be able to go to joannamcspadden.com, and then it has a /books /Obsidian Tide. And that will be fully clickable when we're published. So you don't have to worry about trying to type that down to remember it. You'll be able to click through on that. And tonight we're going to talk about why it's hard to be an introverted writer with a message. That's kind of the focus, but we're going to talk about your story. So one of the things I like to ask artists first time I get on the show is like, what motivates you? Like, why do you do what you do?
Yeah, so for me, I want to make an impact. And being an introvert myself, writing kind of comes more naturally to me to be able to do that. And one of the major messages that I am really passionate about spreading is the don't settle message. And so I want to make an impact in people's lives with that message. And I think I've seen a lot of people in my own life kind of go down the checklist, kind of create the life they've been told is successful. And I really want to kind of challenge that way of thinking. And like I said, writing is much easier for me.
Well, it's a creative kind of, I think there's a creative kind of impulse in people when they're children and nobody, puts it down. And then as you get to be an adult, they start saying, well, that's foo-foo. You shouldn't want to, the artist life is foo-foo. You got to have like a stable job. And so it's hard sometimes to be a creator because there's like, people are always down on it. They say, well, that's not like being a banker. It's not like being a programmer. It's not like being a lawyer. So I noticed like you have a main gig, which is you're a software developer. I happen to be in software design. I'm a business system analyst, so I've been in that world too. And does that help you in your fantasy writing because you're kind of in a science-based job or technical job?
It does. Yeah, it does. And it's maybe not intuitive to think that, but computer programming can be pretty creative. You have to solve problems in creative ways all the time. And you're also doing that when you're writing a plot, and especially fantasy, because it can be pretty complicated. You've got magic systems to define and different worlds to create. So there's a lot of stuff to figure out. And it's also, my writing is kind of the creative outlet that, I don't get as much at work. But it's still very, very similar in a way.
Yeah, because like you have to build character design, you have to build world building, you have to create paths for your plot line, and in anybody it's like deep into codes, like there's different paths based on what you do. It's like if you're doing a murder mystery, like you find this clue, it goes this way. You find this clue, it goes that way. And then you have alternative paths based on what you're finding. You might find the wrong suspect. You might go down a wrong rabbit hole. So like you can make any story can have that kind of twist. And you can, if you've got a logical mind, you can like map that out.
Yes.
Do you like to be pre-planned because of your kind of software background, or you do like flow state type of stuff?
I'm very much a plotter and an outliner and a planner when it comes to writing. It doesn't always go as planned, though, I will say. Like if I am in a flow state, which is also really important for introverts, but if I am in a flow state, sometimes it goes in a different direction. And I let that happen when it comes up, but I have to kind of know where I'm going first. Mm-hmm. So I have to have somewhere to start, somewhere to end. I'm actually working on brainstorming for my second book, and it's a lot of questions, right? I'm like, okay, but what about this? And what about this? And I don't want any plot holes. So it's a lot of questions to answer before I start writing even.
Yeah, it's like building a world. Like anytime you're an artist, like you put a painter, you put the foundation down. Like,
Yeah,
people might not understand how much work it is just to build the foundations of like the creative process. As a musician,
right.
you're putting down basic tracks, you might not see the full picture of the song. You don't say, well, how does that work? Because in your head, you see this whole vision, but you might be doing one track at a time or one piece at a time, and it's like it's not the whole holistic vision of the entire project. But you've got to have the
Yeah.
kind of foundation good or it won't work.
Yeah,
They has
no,
to be a
exactly. And there's so much story that I know and have written that like readers will never see, right? But I need to understand them to know motivations of the characters, to know why they're doing what they're doing, and to, give them a goal. So there's so much behind the scenes.
So what made you want to be a writer? Because some people are like, well, they get like imposter syndrome and they're like, oh, I can't be Hemingway. I can't be Shakespeare, so
Right.
why should I even try? I can't be Orwell, so why would I even try? Right? Did you feel like you had something to say? You didn't have a problem thinking like, well, I have a right to say it.
Oh no, I still deal with imposter syndrome all the time. I mean, even when I had my physical book like in my hand and I was selling them and people wanted me to sign them, I still feel like I don't know what I'm doing. Um so, so that still definitely happens, but I think knowing how passionate I am about the overall message, and I would also get kind of scared that there's a lot of people out there that are writing books, but I have a very unique voice, and I think that it's important that we all have a chance to share our messages and our voices. And like I mentioned before, like being an introvert, that's a really hard thing to do. So you have to find the right ways that work for you. And for me, writing was the answer. And I've had a lot of support. So
That's that's
it
good.
is not an easy thing.
Well, it's good
For
to have the
sure.
support because if you're in an environment where you don't get the support, then it kind of reinforces your imposter syndrome, and
Absolutely.
then you never throw that at the wall. Like a lot of times, like once you throw something at the wall, you throw it into the world. Then you get the
Hmm.
haters, you get the people, critics. Maybe they're not even writers. Is like they immediately have some kind of something to say. And
Yeah.
the way I look at it is like every human being has a different take on their experience in the world. So it's like when we talk to people on the podcast, there's a reason why we talk to individuals all the time, because every person has a different point of view. They have a different way of analyzing what's coming into their world. And it's
Yeah.
interesting to get that spin where some people like the general society, I think, likes people to just take the canon, like I said, oh,
Mhm.
Shakespeare or Hemingway, and that's all it is. Like you can't look at anything else because then that's like it's not legitimate. But it's like I think people won't make any progress if you just stay in the can, and you have to kind of push it, and then come up with new visions.
Yeah. And I think part of the canon is extroversion as well. They want you to act like an extrovert a lot of the time. And that's been a big struggle, trying to determine as an introvert, how do I do this? How do I
Mhm.
find the right audience? How do I find the right medium for me?
So when you got into writing, did you have like the beta reader kind of environment, or did you have like trusted people that you were able to like bring things to? Did you have a way to kind of put your thing into a community and get positive feedback to make you feel like you can make forward progress?
Yes, and that was really important. Actually started this journey for real. Like I've been trying to write the book forever, but when I hired a writing coach, that's kind of when it all started rolling and becoming
Mhm.
real. So I had this great partner in my writing coach. She not only gave like seminars, but also worked with me one on one. And she would read my writing, help me with the plot. And that was a really good starting point.
Mhm.
Like you said, getting the beta readers as the next step and kind of, letting other people in to my writing was really scary, but really important and like really rewarding. Not because they had glowing, things to say, but because every piece of their feedback like made the story better. And
Yeah,
I actually
positive,
ended up, yeah,
positive feedback. Not just somebody saying I hate it. Like, what's the like? If you have somebody reads it, all they tell you is they hate it, but that's not very valuable. If
no,
they like tell me what you didn't like about it, and
right.
maybe how I could make it. Show me what is it that you hated. It's
Yeah,
like it's never very productive. Just why I hated it. It's like, well, that's
right.
fine. That's like doesn't
Yeah,
really move me to change it if you don't tell me why.
right. Yeah, yeah. So, I mean, and it wasn't even necessarily just blanket feedback like that, but it was, even if they just said, I liked it. Well, why did you like it? Like, how can I make it stronger? And so
Mhm.
every piece of feedback, positive, negative, all of it, like made the story better in the end. So I think that what I've got now for what's being published in March, I think, it's the best that it can be. And that's thanks to the community that I had and the support that I had and the readers that took the time to read it and give me some feedback.
Well, what do you think about the way the writing market is today? And like, what's your path to publication? Are you working with an independent distributor, or you're self-published? You're working with a small indie, book publisher or a bigger publisher? What's your path?
So I'm working with a smaller publisher, and it is technically like a hybrid publisher, but they do give a small advance so they can be considered traditional, and they do have ways into bookstores. So you can get my book at Barnes and Noble and Target and Books a
Oh,
Million
that's cool.
and all of those places. So and they've been a really good partner, take me through the whole publishing process from cover design, internal design, like all the edits. And it's been a journey.
Mhm.
All of the edits, I don't know if people realize how many stages of edits there are once you
Yeah,
finally even finish the story.
yeah, it's a big process. But I wonder also, because being an introvert, it's interesting. Like, once you write the book, then you've got to, like, well, you're on this podcast, so you're in that game. So you're
Yes.
starting to do like the pre-publicity. Is that hard
Hmm.
for you to like be here doing this, or have you kind of resolved that, like, in order for me to get this book out there, I have to do things like this?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's kind of both. I think, I'm pretty nervous, but I believe in it enough to be here, right?
Mhm.
So it is probably more difficult than for someone who is more extroverted.
Mhm.
But I think it's definitely worth it. And I think as long as us introverts we find a balance between doing stuff like this and not doing stuff like this, we have to do stuff like this sometimes. So, and we can, it's just we have to take the time to recharge after this and not
Yeah,
try to just like jump into the next thing. Like, okay, don't
yeah, shake it
expect me to
off.
be productive.
Yeah, you got to shake it off. Like, people don't give themselves time to recover. Like, if you
Yeah,
just,
yeah,
yeah, you really, it's very important when you're creative. Like, you just don't go at it. Like, if I'm in a studio, I just don't sit at my piano for 8 hours straight trying to
right.
bang it out.
Yeah,
Like, I have to kind of give myself a break,
right.
and if you go on a publicity campaign, you don't set it up so you're stressed yourself out. So
Yeah,
you're going like bing, bing, boom, bing, bang. You're just flying, doing all this stuff. Like, you have to think about, like, what is sustainable and good for me
right,
overall. But I know
right.
sometimes, like, the machine of, like, sometimes the creative machines are oriented sometimes to do very extreme things in terms of, like, oh, well, if
Yeah.
you're going to go out there, you're going to do a book tour, you do have to go, go to New York, then go to
Hmm.
Boston, then go there, do there. It's like, so is that in the cards, or would you just do things virtually?
So I would love to do a book tour. I would probably be exhausted by the end of it, but I still, like I said, I mean, the message, the book, I believe in it so much that it's worth it for me to, you know, be a little challenged for
Engage in
a
that.
period of time. Yeah,
Yeah, it's just another phase, because once you put something out
yeah,
there, you have to promote it. Like, you have to, you can't just like a lot of times artists is like, well, I want to just work on the next book. I want to work on
Yeah.
the next painting. I want to work. Well, how are you gonna? You got to get it into the gallery. You got to get it into the bookstore. You got to get it into the record store. You got to get it on streaming. Like if you don't
Mhm.
do the work, it's like you can keep on working, but there's like it just piles up all this work, and you have to start to just make choices like which things are you going to
Mhm.
work on, right? It is that hard. Like if as a writer, like you might already be thinking about the next thing, but
Yep.
now you have to promote this thing. But you mean you put some time maybe on the next book because you can set aside time you can manage. But like, is that like in the cards? Like, do you find yourself like working on something and say, "Oh, this would work better in the next project"?
Yes. Yes. So I am already working on the second book, and it is hard to find the balance sometimes because I don't know if it's just an introvert thing, but at least a creative mind thing. You just want to jump into the next thing, like you said. And I would really, rather just dive into that, get
Hmm.
totally immersed in the next book. But I do have to pull myself out of it and do the marketing for this book, so that I can write the next book and that there will be people, ready to read the next one. So, I mean, I realize there's an importance to both of those phases. And I mean, like you said, it's a phase, it's a different stage of the process. So you have to respect it.
Yeah. So, like, what can a reader expect by when they read Obsidian Tide? Like, I don't want to give away the whole. You don't want to give away everything because you want people to get it. But maybe you can kind of
Right.
give us the elevator story that doesn't ruin it.
Yeah, totally. So it's an epic high fantasy. So it takes place in a different world, and it's about when a deadly disease hits the heart of a kingdom, and there are two main protagonists that the disease affects them both in different ways, and they have to team up together to try and find a cure for this disease that there's no known cure except for this ancient relic that's been lost to time. And so it's like nearly impossible task to try to find this magical relic. It's guarded by monsters and all of that. So that is the main like storyline. I will say though, it's about a lot more than that. I've tried to put like, deeper meanings into the story. So that's what it is
Yeah.
about on the outside. One of my main characters is an introvert and trying to navigate how to be a hero when you're an introvert and when you're maybe not comfortable with the spotlight and maybe not comfortable with what everyone wants
Reluctant
you to
hero.
be. Yeah. Yes, very much. Yes.
But that's a
Yes.
cool character because then like you can see them growing. The reader will probably
Yes.
see them grow and know how hard it is to see what they're doing. They get to be where
Yes.
they are. And so that's
Right.
a cool subtext that while you're getting into the characters, like, wow, that's really hard for them to do that. And they're putting them in themselves in that scenario. And the thing about
Yes.
fantasy and science fiction, like a lot of times you take things from like reality and then you bring it
Mm-hmm.
in. And so
Mm-hmm.
so some of your subtext might be like statements about things, but they're kind of like masked, and that's just something that, Rod Serling used to do, Ray Bradbury, Isaac Asimov, they all would have,
Yes.
hidden in the fantasy and the fiction is like assessments of the current state of the world, but kind
Mm-hmm.
of within a fantasy world. Is that something that you
Yeah.
try to do as an author, or you just strictly fantasy?
So I don't do that consciously, but I think that it just happens, that it ends
Mhm.
up being that way. And I will say there's a lot of um, historicalness to my story. So you'll see a lot of themes of like Victorian England and kind of what it I base their culture on that time period. And then
Oh
one
wow,
of the
cool.
other cultures is more like Russian, like old ancient Russia.
Oh
So
wow.
there's a lot of like bits that kind of have merged together to be this interesting new world that I have taken, purposefully from this world. But yeah, I think it mostly just kind of happens naturally, that kind
Hmm.
of thing.
So it's cool that you have like a history lesson. I mean, you take in like real history and then they brought pieces of it, that structure into this modern world, so you can have that kind of world building that you did. So you probably
Yeah.
you looked at Victorian era and you probably dived into
Mhm.
your research to make it
Yeah.
somewhat accurate, rather than just
Yes.
kind of just making it up on the fly. That's the work that
Absolutely.
people don't see that is
Yeah.
done for any kind of work. It's like the pre-work
Mhm.
that, like you said before, like that you have to build all these foundational concepts to your
Yes.
satisfaction that you've got it right. And
Yes.
that's
There's
so
a
how
lot of
how
research.
how long did it take to actually build everything to create this book?
So the world building, it took me about a year, honestly. And I spent a lot of time on the religion because that is a big part of the book and how magic exists, in this
Mhm,
world. So I did spend a lot of time on that, taking, inspiration from a lot of religions that we have,
mhm.
in our world. And I will say it took me a year. Did it need to take me a year? Maybe not, but I love world building and
Yeah.
I probably planned out way more than I needed to. I know a lot about this world that probably isn't relevant, but it was a lot of fun.
Now, like a lot of people when they write novels today, they kind of anticipation that there's going to be a series. Is
Yeah,
this like a book one of a series?
it is. Yes. Yes. I had originally thought it was going to be three. I started plotting out book two, and I realized this is probably four books. So right now we're looking at a four-book series, and Obsidian Tide being the first one.
Awesome. So is there going to be
Yeah.
kind of any kind of linkage language to link the books together to say that this is part one, two, or are you just going to people will just know that this is part of the series? Is it going to have like an overall theme name?
Yeah, so the overall series name is the Lumos Gems Chronicles.
Okay, so
So
you
it's
got that.
about this. Yeah.
That's cool. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's like I'm a big comic book fan, and that's a
Oh,
fantasy
yeah.
world. And
Hmm.
I'm a child of the '60s, '70s, and I was big into like Jack Kirby. And Kirby, he's known for creating all these fantasy worlds, like the world that we see with Marvel today is all
Yeah.
like the stuff that was in his head. All the fancy characters and the weird machines and everything. He built these really strange like worlds that the movie industry has been able to take and turn into like real fantasy. Because I remember just reading the books in the '70s and like, oh, I was entranced. I was enthralled. I was just
Oh,
reading this
yeah.
stuff. And it's like the fantasy world, like when you read Tolkien, you get into that kind of thing. It's just really deep. And so
Hmm.
like how was that something that as a kid you were drawn to fantasy books?
Yes, very much. I read as much fantasy as I could get my hands on. And one of the first series that I fell in love with was Lloyd Alexander's Prydain Chronicles.
Mm,
And I actually read, I think, the fifth book in the series first because I didn't know it was a
in the
series,
series.
and I still loved it. So I went back and read all of them, and I read them again, and I read like pretty much everything by Lloyd Alexander after that. He's a big fantasy middle grade author. Jumped into Harry Potter, love Harry Potter,
Hmm.
still to this day.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's like
so it
it's
was
just
always.
diving into those that fantasy world. It's just because it's like why I like science fiction. Like why do kids like Star Trek and Star Wars? That kind of because it's like space opera. There's like the
Mhm.
space opera. You kind of get thrown into this thing, and a lot of it is based on older ideas. Like a lot of that stuff is kind of rooted in the overall fantasy. It's just pushed in science fiction realm, but got the same kind of world building.
Yeah, yeah, it totally does. And it's such a good escape. And that's, I think why people love it. It's a way to escape for a moment. And that's always been appealing.
It's interesting in today's world. Well, the thing is also today's world is so into instant, like 30-second, 15-second, 2-minute songs, very short attention span. So it's
Yeah.
it's really interesting when you get fans in the book genre that are willing to stay
Mhm.
with you cover to cover And I mean,
Mhm.
they're giving you their time, and like a lot of people don't give time. Like musicians, we're trying to
Yeah,
like we can't do 9-minute songs anymore. We can't do 15-minute songs most of the
right,
time.
right.
Even if we want to, like we can't get them out there. Even though you try to tell people Hotel California is a long song, like that
Right. Yeah.
it's like the Queen song, like Bohemian Rhapsody. That's a long song. So well, you can't it can't be done. It's like well, it was done,
Yeah.
but it's like so. How do you feel that you're able to draw your audience's attention and
Mhm.
get them? And how does that make you feel when you know that they're actually spending time with you?
Yeah. I mean, it feels great. And I'm so glad that I'm able to put together something that people want to keep reading. I will say that my book, Obsidian Tide, is a fast-paced fantasy. Mostly to keep the attention of the audience, right? And it's
Mhm.
not as long as the famous fantasy books. It doesn't have long extended prose like Tolkien or anything,
Yeah, yeah.
and
People
there's
can't
not as
handle that
much
anymore.
like yeah. So it is fast paced. It is shorter. If you want to compare it to anything, it's like the first Harry Potter book in length. So it's
Mhm.
not that long, but it's long enough, obviously, to immerse in the world and to get a good story. And I've heard lots of great feedback from my early readers that they get hooked instantly, and that's kind of the goal. That's
Yeah, yeah. You
what
found the
I'm going
secret
for.
sauce. Well, you found the secret
Yeah,
sauce in the like attention deficit age. They define the secret sauce where like you could want to do Tolkien, but the audience today isn't gonna stand for Tolkien, right?
absolutely.
They're not, they can't even stand for Hemingway now. It's like people
No.
it's like they can't get drawn into it. Like, what's that mean? It's like just you just have to understand where the audience is. So if
Yeah.
where the audience is, and then write for that, but then still keep your goal. And as you
Right.
get like more into it, maybe you could start to, as you get more popular, maybe you could start to take
Right.
some liberties and do some things
Yeah.
that maybe aren't as commercial at the initial aspect. But like when you start, you don't want to drive off your customer, you drive off your audience, right? So you got to kind of
That's
balance
exactly right. Yeah. Yeah. And a lot of publishers won't publish works by debut authors that are too long because of like what you're just talking about. Like the market isn't really for that. You kind of have to build trust with your readers before they decide to spend, hours and hours
yeah.
with
Nobody
your
starts
world.
with
So
with a double triple album when they first come out.
right, right,
you
right,
know,
right. Yeah. Yeah.
they usually just a single. It's like
Yeah.
because
Well, exactly. Yeah.
so you might want to do that, but like well you might have enough material to do that, but you
Mhm.
can't actually sustain it. So you have to have that kind of realism, and it's hard. Like when you're a creator, like you said, you probably want to spend time working on all 4 books, but you got
Mm,
to promote the book that you're on,
yeah.
and then you've got to
Right.
and then you might want to throw the kitchen sink in and say well that's not going to work, it's like so you have to like save some things for later. And
Yeah.
that's always hard because sometimes like as an artist you want to I got this idea right now, it's so prevalent in my head, and I
Mhm.
really want the audience to see this right now, but then like you don't have the ability to kind of put that out like right now. You have a
Right.
process that whatever you're doing is going to take months before it actually hits anybody.
Yeah. And in the publishing industry, it's even longer than that. It takes, I mean, see, I turned in my final manuscript in July of last year, and the book comes out in March, and that's a pretty fast turnaround.
Yeah.
But it's still a long time.
Yeah. So do you find that with social media now there are things that you could do to engage your audience like right now, like what you're doing here, where you could do like
Hmm.
author readings of excerpts and like an
Yeah.
audiobook, but do it like on a podcast or do it on a like a social media post. Like there are ways that you could actually connect like right now. But so as
Yeah.
an author, do you want to engage that way, or do you think it would take away from the work?
So I have been working on engaging that way. I think social media is a great way to start reaching readers and an audience especially as an introvert like myself. Like I don't have to show my face all the time. I can just kind of give updates on what I'm working on or kind of the struggles that I'm having, and kind of building trust, building a relationship with people. And like social media is a great place to do that. So I have started doing that. I'm really glad that you mentioned the reading of excerpts, because I have been wanting to do that. I just need to work up the courage to do that.
Yeah, it's kind of like it's kind of like
That
like well, it's kind of like a poet doing a poetry slam. Like I used to go to this club in Northampton, Mass, and just do like beat poetry, like right off the cuff. And
yeah.
you could just try ideas. So you could have your manuscript, and then you could say, well, I'm just going to kind of try these ideas and see what happens when I'm with this kind of hipster crowd and try my material with the people. And there was a way to engage like right then. It was like a comedy club, but it's a poetry club, and you can just go out and read. And that's kind of like, well, the way the internet is now, you could have virtual coffee shops.
Yeah.
I wonder if there's that thing like that. I mean, I've ran into like virtual comedy clubs that actually do virtual comedy shows, but I haven't seen like a virtual coffee shop. I've seen it for musicians, but not for like writers and poets. And I'm sure it's out there. I just probably don't know where it is.
I've only seen other authors on Instagram do Instagram lives, and for the most part, they're mostly discussing a topic or giving news. But I think that could be a great avenue for doing just some excerpts, maybe, what you're working on, reading that out. Like, I think that's a great idea. That scares me, but I think that's a great idea.
Yeah, it's just something that, we like, with musicians, we always like to do unplugged things where we're like, I'll do the unplugged version of my song just on acoustic guitar or piano, and just do it so the fans engage, because it might take a while for me to get it out. So, you can engage that fan like right now and get their instant feedback, which is like really useful when you're a creative person. It's like, are people going to dig this? Or are they not? It's like, I think it's the best thing in the world, but then my fans like, that's not it.
You're like, good to know.
Yeah, it's interesting. There's a lot of opportunities to kind of, just kind of, just put the thing, they kind of throw it at the wall. And there's a kind of idea that, the social media world gives us the ability with these reels to get engaged, where they kind of want you showing up a lot.
Yeah.
And so that becomes like another, like, is it an obligation? Like, once I start that reel, am I going to be like locked into this real schedule? And now it's like, well, I want to write, and now I got to do reels, and I got to do TikTok. I'm like, do I really want to spend my time doing that?
That has been a struggle of mine. I want to be out there. I want to be engaging. I want to be posting on social media. But like you said, that takes away from the writing time. So I have to find a way to balance it. I've tried to come up with a schedule where it's not too intrusive, but I can, batch content, like do the recording on these days and then do the, captions on this day. So it's not,
you can kind of schedule
so it's not right.
Yeah.
Like for me, that works, but
that's a logical way of doing it. That's a logical
way. Right. That's the like programming way.
Plan it out. Like, instead of like, I could pre-record and then have them like pre-scheduled come out.
Right.
Where I don't have to actually do it at 7:15 every night live. I could actually get a scheduler to push it out. But some people like are challenged and like, well, I don't know how to do that. So then they don't. It's like, well, I don't know. So they don't know how to do it. So they think they got to do it the other way.
Right. And sometimes it doesn't work because they're more spontaneous. They don't think of ideas until they come, and then when their ideas come, that's when they want to share it, and that's great. I'm just not that way. I need to plan.
Stream of consciousness versus like the kind of pre-planned, and it's like it's like a balance. A lot of times it's like, I would say, like in my art, I do a lot of stream of consciousness, but in certain cases, like if I'm working with somebody, I might have to do something that's a lot more controlled and tighter. So if I'm working on a collaboration one, then I have a tighter goal rather than it's all my own work. so I can kind of do whatever I want. But it's kind of like you said, like at the moment, your stream of consciousness dialogue might be better than what you pre-planned, and it could be like you don't know when
Yeah.
that's going to happen. Right. So you have your
Mm-hmm.
world, but then you can say, hey, this dialogue I came out in this stream of conscious session is better than what I
Mm-hmm.
pre-planned. So I'm going to use it. And I guess it's
Yeah.
just having the frame of mind to know that you could use it.
Yeah.
Right. To
Yeah.
not reject it out of fact. Like matter of fact, I'm just going to reject that because it's not in the plan.
Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. Don't want to do that.
Is that hard? Was that hard for you to do? Or you just were always kind of like, if something comes out that's better, I'm going to go with that.
If something comes out that's better, I will go with that. I think just having something planned kind of gives my mind the ease to know I have something to fall back on, that it can come up with the better ideas, because I'm not like, oh my gosh, I have to think of something right now. If I don't think of, my next thing right now, then I'm not going to have anything. So I think being able to have something planned to fall back on is really helpful for my brain.
Yeah, that's a cool thing. And also one thing I like to get into is like what are like three things that folks should know about you that maybe they wouldn't expect.
So I've already mentioned that I'm a software developer. I'm a huge soccer fan. I love Lionel Messi, and I'm so excited that he's here in America. And let's see, I was a professional cheerleader for a while. That
Oh, wow.
was very much a challenge that got me to speak, though, and so it was good. I really did it for the dancing aspect. I was a dancer most of my life, classically trained in ballet, and
Oh,
started the ballet club in college and wanted to keep dancing. So that was a way for me to continue that creative outlet. But it did bring the extrovert challenges of having to do interviews and talk with fans and doing all of that. So that is a fun fact. And what else? I'm also a video gamer, I guess. I guess that falls into the maybe you could guess from the software
software,
background, but yeah, love video games.
yeah. Like video games are in that kind of fancy world, depending on which ones you
And
play
that
with.
is true.
Some of them are so deep they're like movies. Compared to like
Yeah.
I grew up in the 8-bit era, right, where you only had so much capability, and we were like on our
Mm-hmm.
Atari 2600 and NES, and we're like, this is awesome. And now we're looking at these PS5s and like, oh my god, but I was a kid, I would have been freaking out because I was just
Oh, I
excited
know.
that we had Space Invaders.
Yeah. Oh my
I was
gosh.
so
I just
excited.
finished Baldur's Gate, and it was like a movie. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. It's like what we saw was like we were so excited the asteroids was at home and we didn't have to go to the arcade. And it's like this is
Yeah.
such a cool thing. But like now it's so realistic. They're like they look like they're movies. They got dialogue, got actors, actual real actors and voice
Mm-hmm.
actors doing the characters, and you're like, wow, that's really deep. So have you thought about like the licensing for your book? Like would you want to turn it into a video game or film or TV series, or is that in the cards?
I would love that. I think about that a lot. That would be the dream. And the publisher that I've gone with, I have full rights to do any of that comes my way. I still retain the rights, so I can go. Yeah, I can go and do any of that, and that would be amazing. The dream, like I would, just
Jump
be
into
good.
that.
I'd be good if I
Yeah,
can get there.
yeah, that's the dream. And like sync licensing is the dream of all creators now because like the way the world is, like per copy, I don't know, maybe you probably have a better deal with your but musicians, like we don't get a lot for our streams. It's like
Yeah.
it's minuscule amounts of money. We have to do other things like sell our t-shirt. The
Yes.
t-shirt makes me more money than my music. And that's kind of
Yeah.
sad. But that's kind of the way the things are. It's like if I can
Yeah.
sell a theme song to a video game, I can make
Mm-hmm.
way more money than my song on Spotify. And so
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if that's the same thing with authors. Like if you get your thing licensed, do you make more? Yeah, I would think you probably make a lot more money than if it's not licensed.
Yeah, definitely. I was thinking about it recently, and the royalties that I have in my contract are very generous and very good, probably higher percentages than you would see anywhere besides self-publishing. But it is very dependent on book sales, and it's hard to get out there. It's hard to make a big enough impact for you to get a
Big
lot of money
numbers.
from that. So you have to do the other things. You have to you have to do the speaking stuff. You have to do the t-shirts and merchandise, and yeah, you have to kind of create a world around the book. So
Have you thought about
yeah.
doing like an audio book? And if whether or not you would have like voice actors do it, or would you do it?
Yes, I have thought about that, and my publisher might be able to help me produce it, but I definitely would not be the narrator. It is a dual POV as well, so there's a male protagonist and a female protagonist. So there'd probably be two voice actors needed for it. And I mean, I have thought about it, but it's kind of down the road a little bit. We'll see how the launch goes and all of that fun stuff first.
Yeah, it's like there's a whole market with a lot of people that engage on books because they're commuting, and it gives them a way
Yeah.
I used to be a commuter, and it's like the real life scenario. Like I'm on a plane, I'm in the Uber trying to
Mm-hmm.
get to the next gig because I'm working on
Yeah.
an assignment, and I've got like 4 hours of travel,
Ooh,
or
yeah.
with the travel time in one day, and then like I can listen to a lot of books. I can get
Right.
not just like listen to music. I can get engaged into these books and podcasts, and there's just a whole nother way to consume that type of information.
Right. And I think it's hard for people to be in quiet these days as well. So even just doing stuff around the house, I like to have an audiobook going. So,
Mm, yeah,
it's just yeah, I mean, we kind of need constant stimulation now, and that's a really good way
yeah,
to do something that feels productive
yeah.
while
You
you're
get
doing
tired
other
of the
things.
playlist, tired of the Spotify playlist. You put your favorite book on, and
Yeah,
um, and it engages you in a different world because it pulls
it
you
does.
into like a movie in your mind. Like every time
Yeah.
I've read books, I kind of start seeing that like
Mhm.
visual in my head. It
Yeah.
starts. I get my own interpretation of what I think it should be, and that's the way it is. The reader interprets your words, and they get their own, and interpretation of what you tried to do. But
Yeah.
that's kind of it's always interesting that like how the
Mhm.
mind can concoct these images from
Yeah.
words, and
Yeah.
it's just it's always like fantastic to me. Is like that process. It's like, oh wow, that's super compelling.
Yeah. Yeah, it just comes alive.
So when a new idea jumps at you, I think we talked about this. Do you immediately see if it can work in the current project, or like immediately say, "Well, this is actually going to work in somewhere else," and you keep track of them, like in a
I'm
diary
actually
or
very guilty. Yeah. I mean, yes, I'm actually very guilty of trying to fit it into my current project. Um, I want to put everything in, right now. I've gotten better at that. I do have a kind of idea vault that, if it doesn't work, in what I'm working now, I have to save it somewhere so I don't forget about it. And it is
something.
really hard to put those new ideas down sometimes. But, there's only so much time. And, if I have to do the social media and the writing of my current project and the marketing of this book and my software job, I kind of
Yeah.
have to be okay with setting some things down and, giving it the time that it needs when I'm ready for it.
Did you ever use like audio tape to like record ideas? I know back in the 70s, like a lot of authors actually recorded like a lot of their information onto tapes. They would actually like talk into tapes and put a lot of ideas down that way. Is that something you're into? Like a
Yeah,
voice
actually,
memos?
I was like, yeah, I was the kid with the voice recorder, little bitty cassette tapes. Like, I mean, yeah, I was really into that because that is just like the easiest way to just write down an idea and then it's just saved. I don't do that as much now, mostly because I I don't go back and listen to them. It's so
You
much
know,
easier for me to
you just
glance
type
at a
it. Just
note.
type it. Yeah, just type it.
Yeah,
Just 'cause the
just
computers
type
today
it.
are so, you didn't have to go to the typewriter, like, so, like,
Yeah,
if you weren't around the typewriter, but because our computers and our iPads could be around us, like, all the time, it's
yep,
probably kinda dropped off compared to, like,
yep,
60s and 70s where it was more useful because you might not wanna pull the typewriter out, maybe your typewriter's not there, so that's
right,
why you did it.
right. And it's not always with you. I mean, my phone is always with me. If I have something jotted down in there, I can always just like pull it right back up.
Yeah, our phones are at, like, equivalent, it's so powerful, they're, like, as powerful as PCs, in some cases
Yeah,
in terms
yeah,
of what they can do now. You could do
yeah.
research on your phone. It's like that was
Mm-hmm.
unheard of. You'd have to
Yeah,
go to the computer, go to the library. Now
encyclopedia.
you can actually go and do research on your phone at any time wherever you are. You could be in the woods and say, "Oh, I want to look this idea up," and it's like you got it. And it's like that is like just amazing in terms of your efficiency in terms of what you
Yeah.
can do. Do you find that the tools, because you're more technical, that there are tools that you could use in ways that maybe other authors aren't as technical? You know, have you embraced some of the technical innovations now today?
I think one of the things I have an upper hand on is my website. That was, super easy for me to set up. I work on websites as a living, and I can kind of, do the mobile versus desktop pretty easily and make it look good.
Hmm.
So I think that's probably. I mean, I also think that using things like social media might come a little bit easier to me. Um, and I do, I guess, I do have some routines programmed to kind of shut off, certain apps at a certain time if I'm like trying to focus and trying to write. So that's something that I've done with my technical skills as well.
What's your opinion about like people who are saying, "Oh, AI is going to write all the books in the future"? Because somebody came to me and said, "Well, you don't need musicians in the future because AI is going to write all the music," and I'm like, "Really? You really want that kind of world where
Right.
AI writes all the music? But not, I know it could, but do you want that?"
Hmm.
you
Right.
know,
I agree. I don't think that I'll see that in my lifetime. I don't think that it will be the same value, like you were saying. There is a certain voice that people have, even in music. It comes from the soul. It comes from emotion that computers don't have, and they can copy. But I just don't think you'll get
yeah,
the same thing. And also, what I've noticed being on social media as an author, the readers are really interested in the author as well. Like they are interested
mhm,
in the story, yes, but they also really want to know the author. So
yeah,
I
this
think
history,
that, and I'm sure they want to know musicians too. I mean, you follow celebrities, you want to know these
yeah.
people.
You want to understand their motivation. Like the computer is like, what's the
Yeah,
AI agent motivation? But like,
right.
what's Bob Dylan's motivation for this song? What's
Yeah.
what's like every time people dive into the history of these great artists from like Hendrix to Led Zeppelin, you're like, why did they do that?
Hmm.
Why did they feel the need to go this direction? And that's a human thing. It's like what happened?
Hmm.
It's like, oh, we were feeling this, and you get these interviews, and people want to know why the artist was
Yeah.
motivated to do X. And
Right.
that's a human thing. It's like sometimes it's like, hey, I just heard something. Somebody was humming something, or I saw something. I
Yeah.
saw this person, and it made me do this, and I saw this event, and then I wrote this song. And that's a very human thing, and you don't know why. It's like, why would that trigger that? But
Right.
that's the story, and it's very unique, to each
Yeah.
individual artist.
It is. Yeah. And I think everyone's interested in it. Everyone wants to know. Because they feel things all
Yeah.
throughout the day
So
themselves.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
just want to feel that. I think the authenticity,
Mhm.
and I think also the vulnerability of being a human being. Like when you're a human being,
Mhm.
you're not 100% perfect. And sometimes
Right.
it's like the happy accidents and the imperfections.
Mm.
Yeah, it's not
Mhm.
100% perfect, but that's actually the character. Because, you know, sometimes
Right.
when you get to be a writer, you get like eventually you get like forgiven for your style if it's not grammatically fully correct, right? Because then
Mhm.
artists actually
Mhm.
writers will go and do things. Like I think there's stories about
Yeah.
Stephen King. Sometimes like he has certain things that are not correct, but he gets away with it because that's his style. Like
Yeah.
that's actually part of what his character is, and it doesn't have to be perfect because that's who he is. He's trying to
Yeah.
engage so you feel something, and doesn't have to be perfect for you
Mhm.
to feel
Mhm.
it.
Right. Right. And I think when I'm creating characters, I don't want them to be perfect. Perfect is boring. Nobody wants to read about, the guy who knows how to do everything perfectly. Like they want to watch the struggle, they want to watch the growth. I mean, one of my biggest complaints with the Han Solo movie was that there was no growth, Like it's just you want to see
Yeah,
the human side.
yeah. You just don't want to be a caricature of what you think he should be without any depth. It's like you want to know that the whole history. You know, you've got to feel like that backstory. Like you got to make it
Yeah.
compelling. You gotta make it have
Mhm.
some layers. You gotta make it have some
Yeah.
not obvious complexity, you know, but so that you get like, oh, like the best things are when you actually discover something and it doesn't hit you over the head. You know,
Yeah.
you might have to go
Yes.
back and look at it. You might have to
Mhm.
watch it again, you might have to read it again. I've
Mhm.
always been kind of drawn into things that are kind of like puzzles, and
Mhm.
and you might interpret it a certain way and not really get that it was more complicated. And you just kind of took it at
Yeah.
face value, and you're like, oh, what's this thing you're talking about here? I got to go
Mhm.
back and figure out.
Mhm.
Like, oh, I missed something. So it's like it draws you in to try to understand like the bigger picture.
Yeah. Yeah, totally.
You know, and the people are so time crunched today. I don't know if people like that, but like I like it.
Yeah, yeah, I do too. I do too. I think people do. I just think they don't give it the time necessarily, but I think everyone does. They really like discovering the depth.
Yeah, I mean, that's the whole thing about being a writer is like you get people to at
Mhm.
least go cover to cover. Right? It's not like
Yeah.
15
Yeah.
seconds, 30 seconds, 90 seconds that
Mhm.
you get hours. So
Yes.
that's an advantageous because then that's like what you said. They want to know about you as the author. So then they're
Yeah.
gonna find like what do you like to eat? Do you like to cook? Do you like to they want to know your
Right.
like look well, where do you live? It's like not they're gonna like they're gonna track you down, but they want to kind of know you're a person,
Yeah.
you're a real person, not some kind of
Exactly.
pseudonym that you're like a real individual and you have a history and it's like why you do what you're doing, you know.
Exactly. Yeah. And they want to, that's how you get them to read the next book.
Yeah, because you get drawn in, and if you get drawn
Yeah.
in, you know that's the whole you know the magic of
Yeah,
of
it is.
of
Absolutely.
books is to get that kind of curiosity when you're a kid and you're so excited to be
Mhm.
reading like Charlotte's Web for the first
Yeah.
time. And like you're
Yeah.
like oh like I don't know if I like books. And then you read something like Charlotte's Web or A Wrinkle in Time, and you're like, wow, I'm really
Yeah.
getting drawn in. You know, as a kid, I was like, I when I
Yeah.
read that stuff, it's like, wow, they really kind of pulled me into like, oh, I like reading. I like what's going
Yeah.
on in these
Yeah.
stories. You know.
Yeah. The emotion that it pulls out of you, just kind of unexpectedly sometimes, it's like you said, it's magic.
Yeah, it's great to be in the kind of magic world. It doesn't just have to be Hollywood. I think a lot of people are just drawn into the movies, drawn into the
Yeah.
TV, but the original kind of thing that people had before the electricity, you know, is the books. Uh,
Yeah.
and I think it's really important to give yourself time as an individual to like check out a new author, like
Mhm.
whenever you can, like once a month, once a week, whatever your time
Yeah.
bandwidth is. And we do talk to a lot of authors on this podcast, and I do want to thank you again for being on the podcast.
Yeah.
And I
Of
want
course.
people to check out your link so they can get to your book, and that's fully clickable. And we do encourage you to engage there and check it out. You know, and check out how to get on the list to be like pre-order or what if that's
Yes.
available. maybe you can talk more about that. Is that available right now?
Yes. So the book you're able to pre-order it. Like I said, anywhere you can pre-order it. Amazon, Barnes and Noble, Target. It's pre-orderable everywhere. So yeah, go ahead.
Well, that's great. Like we do love being able to break, people, and we do have from time to time people come back. So like in the future, if you ever want to come back with your next book and kind of do a follow-up
Yeah,
interview, whenever that's ready, like we do love to be able to kind of follow the people we talk
yeah,
and kind of show where they are after the first interview. So yeah, that's always an open invitation. And thank you again for being on the Family Electricals podcast.
yeah. Thank you so much. It's been great.
Thank you.